Stevens. I'm here with my good friend, Bruce Stankavage, up here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And Bruce, it is good to have you on the show, man.
Man, great to be here.
So we're going to get right into it, buddy. I want you to let the audience know a little bit about your basketball journey. So take me, you're 15-year-old Bruce Stankavage, just outside of Philadelphia. Where did your journey start? How did it go? Where did you end up? And that kind of deal.
Right. I think I want to even back it up a little bit further and kind of go to my 10-year-old self, where I was the younger brother of an athlete, played basketball and football in high school, and I remember going to all his games, as a 10-year-old, and he was a superstar, ended up playing quarterback at the University of North Carolina, and I was his little brother, and I was the ball boy in the football games, his high school football games, and then during the basketball games, I remember dreaming, one day being out there on the court like he was and everything, and so I think it just starts there. We come from a very athletic family, and I just kind of migrated into sports. And then I remember when I was a sophomore, actually I remember as a ninth grader going to games with my dad. My brother's 7 years older, so he's gone, but we were in the community and knew the coaches, and I remember traveling about 45 minutes away going to a high school game, and just during the national anthem, just sitting there like dreaming as a ninth grader. Man, could I be out here next year? Was I good enough to do it? And then my sophomore year, I ended up starting, was a 3-year starter. Back then we didn't have 4 years in high school, and so that was, that really kind of kicked it off, and played, for 3 years in high school, and ended up playing in college at Lafayette College in Pennsylvania.
That's where you got your buckets in college.
Yeah, some of them. It didn't start out that way. I mean, I gradually progressed in the college game, getting used to it. We had some good players, and 3 out of the 4 years, my teams were pretty good.
So what type of player would you say that you were in your prime, in your best? What were the best things that you did?
It's the word that comes to my mind, which I'm not necessarily proud of, was cocky. I was I was arrogant and probably wasn't really fun to play against, and maybe probably with, but I think my senior year in college, like I just can score, I could compete, and I love just being out there playing, so it was, that I was really a combo guard in high school. I shot it all the time. And back then, that's how old I am. We didn't have a 3-point line. First time I had experience with 3-point line was a freshman in college. So I was shot it all the time in high school. In college, they didn't really have a ball handler, so I just kind of migrated into handling the ball more, and I just would score, shoot threes, take it to the bucket, just kind of.
Now I caught you on the tail end of your your basketball career. I know you played a ton of pickup after you got done, and that was something, it's a way for you to keep playing and stay in shape and that kind of thing. So I would say your competitiveness and your defensive ability. I was impressed with your defensive ability, even at the age that you were, man. Like, we've gone toe to toe a few times, and I've been impressed. That was something, and I can only imagine you as a younger player, like.
Right, and it's funny, as a sophomore, I was Defensive Player of the Year in my conference.
In college?
Yeah. Wow. So, it's just something that I took pride in college, just like that I wanted to shut down the other guy's best player. And I think I wasn't the quickest or the fastest, but I had long arms, and I think I could just feel where guys were doing. And if you play enough, you kind of just get a sense of the options of what a guy could actually do with the ball. They weren't doing the new James Harden behind the back moves back then. So I don't think I could guard that. Nobody can. But it's just, so I think you kind of knew where guys were going and just could anticipate it. And defense isn't, it's really about heart and effort, and just competing.
And belief. You said something about, you being maybe cocky or arrogant, but your belief in yourself that you could shut somebody down was massive.
Yeah. It certainly didn't hurt, but I think, and it helped us win. You know what I mean? I think if you limit the other team's best player and you can still score, you got a better chance of winning. So it was also that way that, like, I remember playing pickup games, and that probably comes from two things. One is being having an older brother who was a football player and a good basketball player. He used to beat the snot out of me playing. When I was 12, 13, 15. I'm 15, rising sophomore. He's 22, just finished his football career at Carolina, trying to play in the NFL.
Right.
And we still play some pickup or one-on-one or two-on-two. And Rod Elkins is one of his buddies, was a Carolina quarterback with 6'4" stud.
Right.
And playing against football players, they're just physical. They're just tougher, and they would just. Yeah.
And they're already bigger and older,
and they would just. We got nothing free. There was no free buckets.
Right.
And there was no free buckets. It's just kind of, and like that's just how I learned to play. Like you're not gonna get free buckets, especially if you made 3 or 4 in a row. There's no freebies, and so I think it's just kind of how I learned to compete,
Well, so we met through your son, your oldest son, Luke, who is a stud of a player now, and I've had the privilege of working with him, and so now your dad, and you've got a son who is a junior this year, who's being recruited, and he's kind of going through some of the processes that you went through, and so talk a little about being a dad in this position, and your son is a star at the school, and he's a fantastic player. Like, what are some of the thoughts that are going through your mind now?
Yeah, good question. I think one of the first things that hits me as you ask that is like, man, I wish he played the piano. And I say that jokingly because it would be easier on me as a dad and a former player if he played a sport I didn't know about.
Oh yeah.
In many ways.
Yeah.
Luke's the oldest, and the two younger guys play lacrosse, football, and ice hockey.
Right.
I mean, I know a little bit about football, being around it, but those are sports that I, hadn't studied it and practiced for thousands of hours and play in college. And so, it's hard. It's not hard to watch, but I know a lot.
You know too much.
Yeah. And so that's what kind of first hits me.
Yeah.
It would be easier, but that's about me and not about him. But I think it's just great joy to watch.
Yeah.
I remember when two things. I used to work out in Philadelphia, drive 45 minutes, and my dad would drive me down there. And it's in the 3rd floor at LaSalle University, this hot, old, ugly, dirty, dingy gym. And my dad would always come in and watch.
Yeah.
I'm like, Dad, what are you doing? Like, why? It's hot. It's, we're not doing anything. It's long lines and reversed layups. I never really understood it, until now. Just to be able to watch Luke work out is a privilege. Yeah. Like, it's just joy. It's just fun. Like whether he makes shots or miss shots, or it's just fun. It's just a gift, that, someday they'll understand, I hope.
Sure.
Because they, he's getting to the age that obviously doesn't want me there watching his workouts or anything, and that's fine, and I get it, but it's just a lot. It's a lot of fun to watch.
Well, it's part of y'all's relationship, and it's you do have knowledge of the game, and I'm sure at this point he's probably, if you try to impart some knowledge, he's probably bucking some of it, and just so even that dance that you guys are doing in your relationship, but for him to also there's gonna get to a point where he's like, right now he's like, Dad doesn't know anything. There's gonna get to a point where he's like, oh my gosh, my dad knew a ton, like we all go through that phase of through high school and then college, but okay, so how about where you the recruiting process and where you see him maybe being able to play, or how, mentally, I just want to, where are you there? Like, how do you wish he was getting recruited more? Are you cool with where he's being recruited? Where you all together?
Right. Yeah. I think. My hope for him is that he goes to a place that he will play.
Yeah.
That's
for sure.
And that's what I tell any of the athletes I've ever talked to. And nowadays especially, it's a full-time job.
Yeah.
And if you don't get to play and you're not having fun, or you get hurt, you need to like the school and have a chance to play.
Right.
That's
right.
playing at the highest level, while a lot of kids dream of that, play at the highest level and not playing, or are you playing at any level and not playing? It's not fun. Who likes to practice and not get out there on the court when the lights are on? So that's my hope for him.
Hey guys, this is Colin. We had a little interruption when we were recording this podcast, so I just want to frame up the next section for you. As we come back in here, Bruce is talking about the nervousness that he experienced as a high school basketball player, and then it leads into this.
And I had a minor. I handled the ball, but it wasn't. The senior was the star. I was just kind of to handle the ball and break the press and do certain things. But I just remember that I felt the weight of the world on me, and which makes sense if I'm getting my identity and who I am from my performance on the court.
Sure.
That's a big burden for a 15, 16, 50-year-old to carry.
Sure.
And so that burden, stayed with me, stayed with me through college. In fact, my first 2 years in college, I would dry heave before games. I felt the weight. Yeah, I felt the weight. The first time it happened, we were playing David Rivers, who was an All-American at Notre Dame, and Notre Dame actually came to play at Lafayette College. Their coach at the time was Garrett Williams. Garrett Williams was a coach at Lafayette College back in the day, and so that was the connection. So Notre Dame actually came to our little school, and I remember we just finished the scouting report, and had the names on the board, and the coach told me that I was guarding David Rivers, and he also said, "Hey, they're going to press us. You better be ready for the press, or we're going to get embarrassed on national TV."
Right.
And I was like, "Yeah, right." My heart, I can feel my heart now. Like, "Oh, really? Thanks, coach."
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm already, nervous as just in any game. It's on TV, All-American, at our court. I have 50 family and friends there. The gym's packed, and so on. And finished the scouting report. The team files out of the locker room, and we go down steps in our locker room, and then we meet and then go out into the gym. And so as we file out of the locker room, the team goes out. I wait last, and I run to the bathroom, and I start, dry heaving. And I couldn't vomit because I didn't have any food in my stomach.
All right.
Because I couldn't eat.
Right.
Right. I didn't eat the pregame meal, because I was too anxious.
Yeah.
And so I remember dry heaving, making those noise, and the assistant coach peeked his head in, and he's like, "Hey man, you okay?" In my mind, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, "No."
Right.
You see, heads up to any people out there. If you see a kid, an 18-year-old with his head in the toilet before a game, like something's not right. Like, hello.
Right.
And he's like, "Well, the team's waiting for you down there before they go out the locker room." I'm like, "All right, I'll be right out."
Right.
And finished and came out, and the team never knew.
Right.
That coach is the only one that knew, probably the head coach, but nobody ever talked to me about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's going on, and so that was my freshman year and sophomore, and so it would happen intermittently for the first 2 years.
Right.
That I would just the weight, those tears that I had as a 10th grader.
Oh, right.
Just feeling the weight that if I didn't play well, we wouldn't win.
Right.
For however that message got in me. So that's a big burden.
Yes, that's an obstacle to fight through.
Yeah.
Or to fight around.
Yeah. I don't think you fight it. I think you understand what's going on. And we were talking before, and you asked me what would I tell my younger self.
Yeah.
I would tell him just to have fun. It's okay, man.
Mm.
It's okay.
And you feel like nobody knew where you were mentally to be able to tell you that? Or did anybody care? I don't know. Or did you keep it all to yourself?
Yeah, I kept it to myself. Mm-hmm. That coach never talked to me after that.
All right.
Nobody never asked me. And so, I looked at all the guys on my team, and I'm the only one struggling. So something's wrong with me.
Right.
So what's wrong with me and I'm a good player. I'm starting as a freshman, and so I just internalized. I had no place to go to talk to anybody about it. I know people cared, but I remember I wrote that story out and published it, and my mom, that's the first time she ever heard about it. And she called me crying, and it's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, that I didn't do anything." I said, "Mom, it's not your fault. It's nobody's fault, but just, so they didn't know.
Right.
And it wasn't.
And that was also a different day and age.
Right.
I mean, it was almost like if you're a man, you don't say anything, you just do, you know, and so there wasn't maybe even an awareness to connect with what was going on inside of you. I mean, now we've got players in the NBA coming out and talking about, the anxiety and some of the depression that some of them even deal with. And we see these stars and we hold them up so high that everything must be so great because they're making a lot of money, or they're on TV every other night, and what they're talking about, hey, there's something so different going on internally.
Right.
And nobody really knows, and some people don't care. Some people think they should just suck it up and get over it.
Right.
That wasn't something that you could just suck up and get over.
No, right. So it's great to see Kevin Love, DeMar DeRozan, and more people, because I think it's becoming more acceptable to at least talk about it. That's what I respect and honor. And now these colleges, these universities have sports psychologists, or at least resources where people could talk to them.
Well, it's almost like too, there's a day and age, and I think it still happens in some sports where coaches will shame players. They'll make them feel bad about what's going on internally, as though they could control it. As if anybody would say, man, I'd love to feel terribly anxious right now, or I'm depressed. I'm choosing to be depressed. Like nobody can control that. And so for a man in that position to say, oh, you're not being a man, like that is so twisted, and so I appreciate so you dealing with that. From what I know a little bit about your story too, also kind of led you into, your family started in North Carolina, and then you guys just kind of picked up and moved to Seattle. In Seattle, I mean, what took you to Seattle?
A master's in counseling psychology. I think just in my own search. That, I remember graduating college and I was thinking, oh man, maybe I don't have to deal with this anxiousness after I stopped playing basketball. And that wasn't true, because that inner terror followed me into my jobs and into my relationships and into my life, and it wasn't, I think I believe that it was the basketball court or David Rivers that made me feel that way. And it's not coming from out there. It's coming from inside and the combination of my thought, feelings, and so on. And so I didn't realize that obviously at the time, but so just my own journey. And this was a graduate school that looked at the world and looked at faith the way that I looked at the world and looked at our life as a narrative. And so, I'll never forget thinking that I wanted to go somewhere to learn more. It was really my search for my own inner freedom. That I remember talking to a friend. So I lived in Durham at the time. It's actually my business partner now. And so I'm on the phone with him. I'm in Durham. He's down here in Charlotte. I'm like, yeah, man, thinking about graduate school and counseling, and he goes, hey man, you ought to look at Dan Allender's school. This is a guy that we knew. And I said, isn't that way out in Seattle? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, dude, you're crazy. I just at that time, my youngest was just born, or no, my wife was pregnant. I'm like, no way. Like I'm gonna move. Like life was good where I was. Business was. Our house.
Exterior life.
Yes, yeah, right. The country club, the kids were going to the pool in the summer. Life was good, but inside I was still struggling with that. So I remember thinking about that, and he told me that. I kind of put it, back in my mind and forgot about it, but they just kept popping back up. Like, why not? Why not go out there? Like, I had some business things were going well, and I had some freedom at the time. I remember getting ready to go talk to my wife, and I was really scared to death, like what she would say, be like, dude, you're crazy, no way, never, and so I told her, and she's like, kind of looked at me funny, of course, as she would. I was 38, 39 at the time, like, what are you doing, having a midlife crisis? And I guess and so we just kind of let it slide. She didn't say anything, and I didn't bring it up, and she just said, okay, let me think about it, whatever. And then I don't know, a couple of days went by, maybe a week, and I remember saying goodbye in the morning, going into my car, and I opened the car door, and sitting on the car seat was a brown paper bag. I was like, what is that? And in it, I pull out, it's a movie. And the movie is Sleepless in Seattle. And my wife wrote a little note that said, I'll follow you anywhere.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so that's how she said yes. And said, yes, we'll go. And so I'm like, you sure? And,
right.
And that's kind of, she's an adventurous woman, obviously. And that's what led us out there.
Right.
I mean, but it was clearly, really just to deal with.
Sure. And so that kind of leads me into like, what does faith mean to you? Like, even when somebody says faith, or what do you believe in, or what's your relationship to God? Like, all of that together, like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah. Good question. I think, I took a whole class in graduate school in Seattle called Faith, Hope, and Love. We spent 50 hours studying those 3 words in a biblical context, and what they mean. And so when I hear the word faith now, to me, faith is rooted in the past. Faith is rooted in the goodness of God's goodness in the past. And so to remember, or to say that we have faith, is to remember what He has done in the past. And if you look in the Old Testament and so on, faith is grown in the desert. It's not grown when things are good. And if you look at that biblical narrative, when things were good for the Israelites, they didn't have faith. But when they were in the desert and they had nothing to depend on, that's when God would show up. And so, and that's a poor description of my class, but when I think of faith, it's just rooted in the goodness of God's past and what He's done for us.
And so, what would you say you're learning most about God, or about faith, or about your relationship with Christ? Like, what are you learning now? What's God had on your heart or mind recently?
Right. I think how I forget that, how I've made it through so many different things. And so, and so I think He's constantly reminding me that I'm not alone, that I'm with you, that we've been through things,
but as you said that, you even said that you've made it through so many things. But really, what He's reminding you is that He's been with you through all of those things.
Yes.
And I think that's a lot of times that's what we get to, is we approach something new, a new obstacle, or something where unexpected, and we get this alone feeling again.
Right.
And it's almost like you're saying, like the Israelites were out in the desert, and like God's like, guys, I just brought you through the Red Sea. Don't you remember when I parted that whole sea?
Right.
Like, how do you forget that? It wasn't that long ago. And it's like we do the same things in our lives at times, where we feel like we're coming to something new, and it's like, oh, what do we do?
Right.
And where He just wants us to understand, like, believe in me.
Right.
Like, I'm with you. Like, nothing's going to happen outside of my will for you.
Right. That was well said. That was what I was trying to say. Like,
well, and I thought that, because as much as we talk and the relationship that we have, like I know where you're coming from there, but I also like I know what it's like to hit something new and to automatically think it's on us. The obstacle, we've got to figure it out. We've got to do this, instead of just like knowing like He's got us.
Right. Yep.
All right, so the piece of faith, how do you operate that? And this is me asking as a father, like, how do you feel like you guide your family in faith? Do you feel like you tell them what they should do or what they shouldn't do, or like how can we approach that as a dad in our beliefs? And you've got 3 boys, so what does that look like?
Yeah, I think just trying to model it. Not. I grew up going to Catholic church every Sunday and ended up hating it.
Yeah.
It was just out of duty, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that was my, that it just became monotonous, and so I just try to model what being a good dad, a good husband is to my wife with them. You know, we're not sitting down having any discussions on faith, hope, and love or anything like that. Right. You know, but I think more in the dailiness. Yeah. That through, you know, osmosis in many ways, just kind of treating people the way you want to be treated. Right. You know, that you know, Dan Allender, the founder of this graduate school that I went to, you know, he's a theologian, he's a psychologist, and he counsels all kinds of different people, and he never used the word Jesus in any of his counseling, not because he's afraid to, but just because he lives out who that is, and he doesn't need to say the word. And if people want to talk about it, he'll talk about it. But in his role, he's not out there preaching Jesus, but it's the foundation of who he is, and it's the support. And so just watching him counsel in a variety of contexts, and then we had a chance to talk to him about it. But he is loving them well, you know, without preaching, you know, and that just really stuck to me, you know, that and then you know, I've been around some people who were like that, and you're like, wow, something's a little different about that person, like more centered, more grounded, or more okay, like what is it? And then when somebody asks you that question, then the door is wide open to share what's going on.
And it seems like almost so many times what you're saying is like you've got to model it. You want to model it for your family. Dan Allender modeled the love of God, right? Which is so contrary to, hey, let's go tell everybody about God. Let's go Tell everybody about Jesus and just talk and just talk and just talk. Right. And then maybe our lives don't model it. Like I mean, I think Jesus warned a ton about that. Right. You know, to the Pharisees or to, you know, the religious leaders at the time that he was talking to. And so for us not to walk in those steps sounds like that's kind of what you want to do. And you know, we you and I talk about things like this all the time when we get to see each other. So I think that's something that modeling piece I think I've taken from you, and it's sunk in with me about, you know, because the other pieces too, you know, in talking with my pastor, we meet often on Tuesdays, is like the thought, you know, he spends a ton of time pursuing God outside of church. Like, yeah, he's a pastor, but personally, he wants to be so connected to God. And in the modeling piece, you know, we talked about it as a group as like, you know, like, do we show our kids how we spend time with Jesus, or how we spend time? You know, like a lot of times it's our quiet time, it's our personal quiet time. So those who we're modeling it to may not see it. And I think so, as I think about that, I think I'm going to want to invite my kids into some of the time that I have with him. Not as a like, hey, this is how you do it, but as in like, this is what it looks like. Because it's like, you know, if we just talk to anybody who had no concept about spending, you know, God, and we said, yeah, you spend time with God, you're like, what are you talking about? Like, can't see him? You know, like, what are you talking about? So I think that's something that I think personally I'd like to
I don't. Yeah, I get it. And I think that's. I haven't invited them into mine. I get, you know, but that makes sense that they can see. But as you were talking, two things come up. One is to your pastor's point. I'm like, I don't think we pursue God. I think God is there. Sure. You know, and that's not what you're saying. But I was just like he's there. It's the immanence of God. Like he's present. We don't have to go somewhere to see him.
But you have to get intentional.
Well, right. I'm just saying, when I hear pursue, like I'm going to get something.
Yeah, that's elusive.
It's out there.
Like
I got you. That's what hits me when you say that I don't, because I've been trying to pursue things my whole life, so I feel like I'm sensitive to that word. You know, for me to pursue the basketball stardom, or pursue relief from the anxiety or inner terror that I dealt with. So, you know, when I can understand that, no, he's right here. We're okay right here, right now, in this moment. Yeah. Like, let's take a deep breath. Yeah. You know, call time out. You know what I mean? And like, that's what I've been learning, and learned that calmness and settledness.
That's a great point, man, because a lot of times we don't feel like God is with us. We feel like we have to go get him, or we feel like we've messed up and that he's distanced himself from us. And so just the thought that he's just there, and we just have to intentionally put our mind and our heart on him.
Right.
That's a really good way of, I will probably change the way that I say, pursuing God, because that makes makes a lot of sense.
It's like so much of life is go, 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 go.
Right.
And like that's not helpful. If we just translate that into our spiritual journey, it's whether you're pursuing God or pursuing money, like the effort. My yoke is easy. What's the like rest in me.
Right.
Like
my yoke is easy, my burden is light.
Thank you. Like that's what I think people need to hear.
Right.
That's what I want my boys to know, Luke to know. Like, Luke, it's okay, man.
Yeah.
Like, we'll figure this out, or you'll figure it out, or we'll, when he tore his ACL, like, it's hard to understand that in the heat of the moment, but I think as we, can operate that way when the times aren't tough, when the tough times do come, we have a foundation, to help us kind of just journey through that.
Right. I dig it. And so, man, I feel like we could go deeper for another, 2 hours, but in effort to keep our audience tuned in, I'm gonna, you've then progressed from school into, you were in commercial real estate beforehand, right? Mm-hmm. And you're still in commercial real estate, but you've also got your, your degree, and you kind of, a businessman, you're free flowing in a lot of what you do so that you can spend a lot of time with your family. What's a day in the life look like for Bruce Stankavage?
Right. I mean, I get up pretty early. My youngest son has got up at 5:30 to 6 o'clock every single day. It's 11 years, and Luke did the same thing, so I never was a morning person, but having kids, it just became a necessity. Like, you can't sleep in. And I must admit my wife usually does most of the stuff in the morning that early, but I get up, and then my mind starts going. And so, so I still get up early. Sometimes I work out, sometimes I don't. And then I come to my office in here, and that's where I do have some contemplative prayer time, is what I would call it, where it's just kind of being peaceful and relaxed and listening and praying, so, and then I just go about my day, with my business and what's going on. I do, one of the things that's always been very, very important to me is being there for my kids and having some flexibility, flexibility, where I haven't, really had a paycheck, 20, I don't even know how long, and so that's great flexibility. There's also a lot of risk in that. There's been some ups and downs, but I wouldn't trade that for anything. We were talking this morning, Nick and I, about people that work in different places and leaving at 6, coming home at 7 at night and making all this money. I'm like, man, this morning we're here, I got to watch Luke work out. I can come home earlier. If kids have to go to practice or football game at 3 or 4, I can make it. That's very important to me. So I'm not sure I answered the question.
No, absolutely.
That flexibility to do.
And so a day in the life of Bruce is really not the same nearly every day, because you do have the flexibility. Now let me make sure that our audience does understand. Bruce, with a graduate degree from out there in Seattle, and then also, you studied business at Lafayette. Mm-hmm. So Bruce has it together. When he says he's not received a paycheck, that means he's not worked really for somebody else that's giving him a paycheck every 2 weeks. Bruce, he gets after it in commercial real estate. I look at him as a mentor in the business world, me owning my own business, so Bruce you're a good leader in that way. So I appreciate that from you. Now I'm gonna turn it on you real quick. is there anything that you would like to ask me? I've been asking you questions all day.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one, like, what would you tell your younger self? What would you tell, let's say, your 17-year-old self?
I think what I would tell my 17-year-old self is that is really that I could be very aggressive and still honor God. I think I had this mindset of I have to love Jesus on one hand, and then like I had to be really nice to I kind of grew up in church, and I was a good athlete just because it was in my genes.
Right.
And so, but I wasn't a tough kid. Like I wasn't a tough mentally tough kid. Like, I had a pretty good upbringing. My parents were pretty loving, and I had an older brother and an older sister. Like, but I didn't know like I could be a dog on the basketball court and honor God with that. Like I felt like in searching for manhood and whatever, like it was always, like I was just taught to be nice, like growing up in church, like be a nice guy and behave well and that kind of thing. And so if I got out of that, that circle or that realm of behavior, then it was almost like I was dishonoring God. And where to be able to tell him like, I'm not, you can do things that kind of pull you away from God in a way but really like he's always going to love you, and he's always going to welcome you back if you get your heart and your mind back on him. And so that's what I think I would, and I would try to dial up the aggressiveness in my, because for my journey was a little different than yours, but I had to fight to get my way onto the court. Right. And I wish I had to fight earlier.
Well, that reminds me, if I can comment on that, because I've studied that or talked a lot about that in different contexts in the past. Like, and I think, the image that people have of Jesus is of the nice lamb over his kindness and weak, and that's only half of who he was.
Right.
And so, yes, Jesus was kind and he was nice, but he was also tough as nails, and he also turned over the tables. And I think that as men, as boys, it's both of us. Like,
absolutely.
we don't honor the image of God within us if we are too much on one way versus the other. We need to incorporate, and to me, that's what Jesus modeled. Is the fierceness, is the toughness, and then also is the kindness. And I saw, surprised we're going back to Dan Allender, but Dan is a wild looking dude, and he's intense, but he's also the kindest man. Yeah. He's the first guy that I actually saw that modeled in. And when he was counseling with this young lady, the kindness that just poured out of him as he heard her story was just, it was just, he modeled it, like the kindness, and that's what I want for my boys too, and it is to have both. I was, I was too nice at times too. I would fluctuate. There's no balance. Right. I was either really jerk or I didn't say anything.
Right. But we also live in a world where kindness gets mistaken as weakness. Right. And so for Jesus to walk around with a ton of kindness, there was no weakness in that. And we had a conversation with we had a high school camp a few weeks back, and it was like Jesus was like the most mentally tough person. Like if you think about like mental toughness, mental toughness on the floor is when somebody can't take you out of your game. Mm-hmm. Like you stay on your mission regardless if somebody starts clapping in your face, or we've seen that image where Matt Barnes tried to throw the fake pass the ball at Kobe's face, and Kobe didn't flinch. Like mental toughness was that, and like Jesus had a mission to redeem us back to God, and like he wouldn't come off of that mission. Like no matter how much they beat him, no matter how much they cursed him or spit on him or did whatever they did, like that's mental toughness. And he didn't have to come out and lash out. Like, so strength on the other side is not just like brute force, like mulling over everybody over and just being like, hey, I'm here, this even the strength that he had, the way that it was displayed is something that
sounds like even you were talking about Dan Allender, how he displayed that.
Yeah, and that's what that would be my hope for. And wisdom is to know when to use the sword and when to be kind. Yeah. And I think in my business life, as a position of power that I have in my company and these people, like, I consciously in many ways try to live that out, which even in these little interactions, which really aren't little, there is no such thing as a little interaction, but with an employee, if I treat them with respect and kindness, in many ways it could change their narrative and their understanding of what power looks like. Because there's such an abuse of power in the world, whether it's coaches, business, and parents, where we disrespect the whole Me Too movement, all of that, and so just in my own little world with some people that do some things for us, I'm very conscious of how I treat them, because I know that if I can be as a person of power, how I treat them matters. Right. And when I treat them with kindness and respect and to see their face light up and to say, wow, I've never had somebody treat me like this before, a boss treat me like this before, and so I say that not because about me, but because there are no minor interactions. Right. How we treat the person that's serving us coffee, with kindness or a smile, like that matters. Yeah. And especially for people that have power or influence. Power is what's come to me, but like that's we have to right that. And Jesus didn't abuse his power. Is your point?
My goodness, right?
Like he didn't, and he was very wary of that, and was very intentional, I guess. Yeah. I mean, but so anyway, I don't know what got me up on that tangent, but that's important, and and so I'm very picky when I allow my kids to be coached by people, because I know what a bad coach can do to athletes. Absolutely. And so I'm very wary. I'm very choosy and picky who I let to influence them, because, I mean, I'm sure athletes that were really good or got a bad coach and ended up quitting or hated the sport or whatever because of the coach or the parent, whatever. And so I am, whether it's hockey, football, I'm going to interview that coach. I want to know.
Absolutely. Right. And that's, that's part of you being a dad and making sure that your boys get the best in terms of, how somebody cares about them. Right. And so, I mean, honestly, that to me, I think is a great question to ask back to the audience. If you're a coach, or if you're a parent, or if you're a teacher, if you're in some sort of leadership position where you have some power, or influence, how do you use it? How do you use it? Is it something that is in a way that represents how Jesus, God incarnate, used his power? And so I think that's something that we can push back on them. But dude, this has been a fantastic conversation. I appreciate you coming on board with us, and I'm excited to see how Luke progresses and his recruitment and how he plays this year, and certainly you and I will stay connected. Is there a way that people can connect with you, social media wise? Yeah, I would just say at B Stankavage. Yeah. On Twitter, Instagram, my email bstankavage@me. Nice. me.com. Nice. So yeah, and I will tell you, also audience, if you do send Bruce an email and some questions about this, he will get back to you. I mean, he's got a great heart, and he's a dear friend of mine. So, Bruce, we appreciate it, man. And for all of you out there, keep living it up. F2 Podcast, we out.